I walked into the reading of my uncle's while expecting awkward silence and maybe a flight back to Portland the same night. I left with control of the family empire and a target on my back. The wood-paneled room smelled like lemon polish and resentment. I hadn't set foot inside the Lawson family boardroom in over a decade, but the old place hadn't changed. Same brass light fixtures, same heavy chairs, same ancestral oil portraits watching us like board gods. I sat near the end of the long mahogany table, trying not to shrink under the weight of a dozen familiar stares. My palms were sweating, tucked beneath the sleeves of my black wool coat. Uncle Victor was dead. Cardiac arrest in his study, the official report said. It had happened fast. Peaceful even. But peace wasn't the word anyone would have used to describe him while alive. He was the family patriarch, the cold iron fist behind Lawson Hospitality, a chain of boutique hotels stretching from Seattle to San Francisco. And somehow, despite years of estrangement, I, Claire Halston, was sitting here, summoned like a ghost, waiting to hear if the man had left me a damn candle holder or something. The lawyer, Mr. Bramwell, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. I'll proceed with the reading. As per Victor Lawson's final will and testament. He started with the expected, small bequests, donations, scholarships, token gifts. My cousin Thomas sat to my right, in a tailored navy suit, jaw clenched so tight I could hear his molars grind. Thomas had always assumed he'd inherit everything. He'd been working at the company since he was 22. First in marketing, then operations, then CEO in waiting by sheer force of nepotism and expensive watch collections. And to my niece, Claire Elizabeth Halston, Bramwell continued, and the room leaned in. I held my breath. I bequeath my controlling shares in Lawson Hospitality Group, comprising 51% of the company's voting rights, and full authority to direct the future of the business, effective immediately. A few gasps. One muffled expletive. Thomas's neck turned the color of raw steak. Bramwell went on unfazed. I also leave Claire the contents of my private study, including a locked drawer labeled Sundown. She will know what to do with it. I didn't. Not yet. But I nodded as if I did because the room was already shifting, already turning. Afterwards, no one looked me in the eye. Not even my Aunt Marian. They just filed out in cold silence, heels and loafers tapping on the hardwood like a funeral drumline. Thomas caught me near the coat rack. This is a joke, he hissed, too close. You haven't been around in years. You gave up your place in this family. I met his glare with a calm I didn't know I had. I didn't ask for any of this. No, he said, voice thick with disdain. But you got it anyway. And you're going to ruin everything. I didn't answer. Just took my coat and walked out into the Oregon rain. Later that night, in Uncle Victor's study, I opened the drawer marked Sundown. Inside was a single worn leather journal and a pocket watch I remembered from my childhood, gold-plated, engraved with our family crest. The second hand ticked quietly, steadily. The journal's first line read, "If you're reading this, I'm dead. And if I know this family, they're coming for you next." I closed the drawer, my heart a thunderclap. Whatever I'd inherited wasn't just a business. It was a war. I didn't sleep that first night. The journal lay on the dresser of my guest suite, Suite 3B of the Ashland Grand Hotel, the flagship property of Lawson Hospitality. Victor's old suite, now mine, I supposed. I lay on top of the duvet in my jeans and sweater, listening to the rain tap against the arched window pane like a ticking clock. Below, the gas lamp-lit street of downtown Ashland was mostly quiet, save for the occasional car sloshing past. By morning, I'd read Victor's journal twice. It wasn't a diary. No sentiment. No apologies. It was more like a ledger of paranoia, suspicion, and names. Names of board members. Names of vendors. Questions about embezzled maintenance contracts, ghost payroll, and a repeated warning. Watch Thomas. He thinks the company owes him something it never promised. The entries ended abruptly a month before Victor's death. When I walked into the executive offices the next day, everything about the place screamed curated prestige, glass partitions, minimalist decor, scent diffusers that gave off some subtle pine lavender cocktail. But the air had shifted. Staff were polite, overly so, the way you are to someone you're already drafting an HR file on. I found the conference room occupied. Through the glass, I saw Thomas standing at the head of the table gesturing toward a chart. The other board members looked pensive, some nodding. When he noticed me watching, he smiled. But it wasn't friendly. 5 minutes later, he showed up at my new office, Victor's old one. "You've read the journal," he said, not even bothering to pretend otherwise. I didn't flinch. I did. Interesting reading. His smirk dropped. "You don't belong here, Claire. You're a social worker, not a CEO. And you're a man who's been signing maintenance contracts with a shell company owned by your fraternity brother, I said quietly. Funny what public records can show. That stopped him. I wasn't bluffing either. After reading the journal, I'd stayed up cross-checking a few vendor names Victor flagged. One, Cascade Property Solutions, billed Lawson Hospitality nearly $500,000 last year. A quick search revealed its address led to a UPS mailbox. The listed CEO? Carter Devlin. I remembered him from my cousin's wedding. He gave a speech that ended in a keg stand. I'm not here to burn this place down, I added. But I'm not going anywhere either. Thomas stepped back, face unreadable. Don't make an enemy of me, Claire. You can't win. I'm not playing your game, I replied. That's why I might. He left without another word. My hands were shaking as I sat down at Victor's desk. Later that afternoon, the head of housekeeping, Mrs. Brandt, knocked on my door. She was in her 60s, wore orthopedic shoes and kindness-like armor. I just wanted to say, she hesitated, then smiled gently. It's good to see you back, Miss Claire. You used to sneak leftovers to the night staff when your uncle wasn't looking. We remember. Something in me loosened. Thank you. That means a lot. She nodded. Just be careful. This place has sharp corners. And just like that, I realized I wasn't completely alone. By the third day, I'd memorized the sound the elevator made on the executive floor. Smooth ascent, short pause, then a faint groan like it regretted the trip. I stood alone in the elevator that morning, clutching a cup of lukewarm coffee and wondering if I looked like a woman unraveling or just one trying not to. Thomas hadn't spoken to me since our confrontation. But I could feel him tightening his grip on the company in quieter ways, email CC to the board that excluded me, budget approval stalled without reason, staff suddenly hesitant when I asked for data. It was death by bureaucracy. I needed someone on the inside. That's when I remembered Daniel Kim. Back when I was a teenager, Daniel had been a junior accountant with a nervous laugh and a desk that looked like a war zone of post-it notes. He'd once fixed a payroll error that would have shorted the kitchen staff's overtime. Uncle Victor hadn't noticed. I had. He was still here, older, more polished, but the same anxious smile. You remember me? I asked as I stepped into his shared office, tucked behind the financial suite on the second floor. Claire Halston, he said, blinking like he couldn't believe it. You gave me a Kit Kat bar once when I was working a double shift in '07. I never forgot that. I smiled. How would you like to return the favor? He glanced around. What kind of favor? I closed the door. Over the next hour, I laid it out. Victor's journal, the vendor shell company, the irregularities. I didn't tell him everything, not yet. Just enough to see where he stood. I can't risk my job, he said at first, glancing at his monitor like someone might be watching. But, I asked. He sighed. But I've been suspicious for a while. Invoices routed through duplicate GL codes. Equipment purchases for hotels that haven't been upgraded in years. It didn't make sense. But every time I brought it up, Thomas's assistant would tell me it was above my pay grade. Can you get me those invoices? I asked gently. Off the record. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. Give me until Monday. If I disappear, I'm blaming the Kit Kat. When I got back to my office, I found a box on my desk. No note, just tissue paper and a small brass key inside. I stared at it, turning it in my hand. It looked old, decorative. Ornate teeth. Victor's journal had mentioned a vault, not literally, but as a metaphor for hidden records. Check the books, Claire. Not the digital ones. Look for the ledger with the blue spine. That night, long after the staff had gone home, I made my way to the hotel archives, basement level. I flipped the switch. Dim fluorescence buzzed to life overhead. The air smelled like old carpet and mildew. Row after row of binders and boxes stretched into the gloom. I walked until I saw it, spine cracked, fabric faded, but unmistakably blue. I pulled it down, blew off a decade of dust, and opened to the first page. And froze. Because the first name listed wasn't Thomas's. It was mine. My name. My birth date. A trust entry made the year I turned 6. I sank into the nearest chair as the full weight of Victor's plans hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just about the company. He'd been preparing me for this all along. I didn't sleep again. Instead, I sat on the floor of the hotel archive. The blue ledger open across my knees, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The entry was dated August 1996, scrawled in Victor's precise, mechanical handwriting. Trust initiated for Claire Elizabeth Halston, 6 years old. Initial assets, $210,000 in Lawson preferred shares. Purpose. Future control. Conditions. Must be above age 30 at time of succession. Secondary keyholder VL. My hand hovered over the page like it might evaporate if I blinked too long. I was 33. The trust had vested. Victor hadn't just willed me shares after a whim or a deathbed regret. He'd planned this. Quietly, secretly, for almost 3 decades. I stayed there until the building creaked with morning. When I finally emerged into the daylight, I felt different. Heavier, yes. But steadier. Like the ground beneath me had shifted. But at least I could see where the cracks were now. Back in the office, I was met with an email from HR. Subject line: concerns about leadership transition. The message was diplomatic, almost apologetic. Several department heads had approached with questions about the board's direction. There were concerns about my experience, my qualifications. In other words, Thomas was rallying the troops. I hit reply. Asked to schedule a town hall meeting that Friday. No filters. All department heads invited. No Thomas to moderate. That afternoon, I got a text from Daniel. Got him. Need to show you in person. Too risky to email. We met in the old breakfast nook near the second-floor veranda. Half-forgotten space turned into an employee lounge. Daniel came in wearing a hoodie and carrying a slim flash drive tucked into a sleeve of manila folders. He sat down and slid it across the table. Invoices, payment authorizations, and 6 months of duplicate GL code records. You were right. Cascade Property Solutions is a ghost company. But here's the kicker. There's a second one. I stiffened. Another shell? Larkspur Linen Services. Billing for high-end linen deliveries and laundering. Problem is, several hotels on the invoice list don't even offer luxury linen packages. He showed me the records. The numbers were clean. Too clean. This is embezzlement, I said slowly. Low level enough to fly under an audit, but over time. Over $2.1 million skimmed in 3 years, Daniel confirmed. All of it routed through Thomas-approved expense paths. My stomach turned. I thought I'd been preparing for a power struggle. But this was a war built on quiet theft. Daniel leaned back, eyes tired. He's been planning this for years. Probably thought Victor would never notice. Or care. I stared at the folder, then at the flash drive. I need to show the board, I said. Daniel shook his head. Not yet. You need allies first. If you go at him now, half of them will think you're making it up. Or worse, that you're trying to burn the place down to prove a point. He was right. I couldn't walk in alone and expect justice. I needed strategy. I needed patience. But I also needed one more thing. To remember who I was before I walked away from this family. The girl who stayed quiet to keep the peace, who learned to listen more than she spoke. Now listening was my weapon. And silence wouldn't be mistaken for weakness much longer. The town hall was set for Friday morning. I spent Thursday doing something I hadn't done since grad school. I listened. Not to numbers, not to charts, but to people. I took the service elevator down to the laundry level first. The air was hot and humid, thick with the smell of starch and old soap. Most of the staff stiffened when they saw me, but one woman, graying bun, wiry arms, name tag that read Elsa, met my gaze. You're Claire, she said. Not a question. I am, I replied. And you're the one who's been here longer than some of our hotels. That got a smirk. 31 years. Since your grandfather ran this place. Mind if I ask you something? I said, lowering my voice. When was the last time Larkspur Linen actually delivered here? Her expression didn't change, but she turned back to the sheet press. Never heard of them. That was all the confirmation I needed. I thanked her and moved on. Housekeeping, kitchens, front desk, maintenance. Every stop the same. Polite nods, cautious eyes, memories of the girl who used to sneak into the pastry fridge or help fold brochures. A few remembered me. Most remembered Victor. He wasn't warm, one concierge said. But he was fair. And he knew all our names. I left with more than just faces, I left with their doubts. Quiet skepticism about Thomas. Questions about budget freezes. Rumors of luxury purchases that never reached the properties. By the time I returned to my office, I had a mental map of who might speak up, and who wouldn't. That night I reread the journal. One line glowed in the margin, written in faded ink and underlined twice. Sometimes control isn't taken. It's earned by outlasting the storm. I arrived at the town hall early. The conference room had been rearranged, no boardroom table, just rows of chairs facing a modest podium. I stood at the back and watched people file in, managers, supervisors, assistants. Not all of them loyal to me, but curious enough to come. When the room settled, I stepped to the front and took a breath. I know most of you didn't expect me here, I began. I didn't expect to be here either. A few chuckles. Mostly silence. I left this family and this company for good reason. The things that happened in this building, behind closed doors, they drove a lot of good people away. I paused. Met a few eyes. But I came back because Victor left me more than just a title. He left me a mess. A tangled one. And if I'm going to stay, I'm going to clean it up. That earned a few nods. I leaned into the silence. We're not going back to the old ways. No more whispered favoritism. No more contracts that vanish into thin air. And no more pretending we can't afford basic upgrades while someone's cousin's fake linen company bills us 6 figures. That landed like a dropped plate. Murmurs. One hand shot up. Karen, head of accounting. Are you saying there's fraud? I didn't blink. I'm saying we've been lied to. And I intend to prove it. The room held its breath. And then one by one, a few began to clap. Not loud. Not raucous. But steady. Honest. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't bang the table. I just told the truth. And they listened. The fallout began within 24 hours. Karen from accounting requested a one-on-one with me the next morning. She brought 2 thick folders, flagged with pink tabs and post-its. She didn't say much, just slid them across the desk and said, I've been suspicious too. But I needed someone higher up to care. Inside were itemized vendor payments over the last 18 months. Duplicate expenses. Mismatched services. And most damning, several approvals signed off electronically by Thomas with digital timestamps that conveniently matched his off-site meetings. I was building a wall of proof. But walls don't hold if the foundation cracks. That night, I drove to my childhood home. The Ashland house sat quiet, tucked behind rows of dogwoods and faded lattice fencing. It had been vacant for years, but Victor kept it, untouched, like a museum of ghosts. My key still worked. Inside, the air was stale with dust and time. Furniture under sheets, portraits half-lit by moonlight. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, maybe some final piece of Victor's mind. Some sign that he'd known this storm was coming. I found it in the study. Taped beneath the drawer that once held the journal was a note in his precise script. If you're here, it means the quiet route failed. Show them what they've ignored. Attached to it was a USB drive. I didn't open it there. I couldn't. The house was too full of memory, my mother's perfume in the curtains, my father's boots still lined up by the back door. They'd left years before, after the divorce. I'd been the last to leave, suitcases in hand, heading for a degree in social work and a promise never to return. Back at the hotel, I locked my office door and plugged the drive into my laptop. It held a video. Grainy. Time-stamped from 4 months before Victor died. The footage showed Thomas in Victor's office, standing near the bar cart. Victor was seated, voice low but clear. You're robbing this company, he said. Thomas didn't deny it. You build a house of cards, Thomas. I've watched you for years. You think because I'm old, I'm blind. But I see you. Thomas's voice was smooth, almost bored. And what are you going to do? Rewrite the will. Victor's jaw tightened. I already did. Silence. Then a laugh, cold, cutting. Enjoy your little plan, uncle. But if you think this family will let a bleeding heart social worker run Lawson, you're losing your grip. I'd rather give this company to someone who knows how to care for people than to someone who only knows how to use them, Victor replied. The video ended there. Abrupt. But the weight of it was immense. Proof. Not just of fraud, but of motive. Of intention. I forwarded it to my personal email. Backed it up to 2 cloud drives. And printed a transcript. Tomorrow, I would call a board meeting. Tonight, I sat in the dark, listening to the echo of Victor's voice. You build a house of cards, Thomas. And I was going to bring the whole damn thing down. The board met at 9 a.m. sharp. I arrived 10 minutes early and set the stage. Transcript copies at every seat. A projector warmed up with the pause first frame of the video. The air in the conference room had that crisp, artificial chill, like the inside of a well-dressed freezer. Most of the directors filtered in wearing polite confusion or veiled irritation. They were used to updates, not confrontations. Thomas strolled in last. Calm, confident, dressed in charcoal and entitlement. Claire, he said smoothly, like he was addressing a child. I hope this isn't another one of your crusades. I didn't rise to it. I just clicked the remote. The lights dimmed, the video began, and silence thickened the air like smoke. No one moved as Victor's voice filled the room, cold and unmistakably lucid. You're robbing this company. The exchange played out exactly as I remembered, Thomas's smirk sharpening slightly with every word. A few of the board members shifted in their seats. One, Mr. Petrov from legal, removed his glasses and began rubbing the bridge of his nose like a man facing a migraine made of consequences. When it ended, I waited a beat. Then I turned on the lights and faced them. I didn't come here looking for power, I said, voice steady. I came because Victor left me the responsibility to protect what this company is supposed to be. I gestured to the screen. Now you've all heard what he knew. What he suspected. And thanks to the work of a few brave staff members, we have documentation backing every word. I distributed the folders, Daniel's evidence, Karen's findings, vendor records. I didn't embellish. I didn't grandstand. Thomas broke first. This is absurd, he barked, slamming one hand on the table. It's circumstantial. Fabricated. Claire's been looking for a reason to discredit me since she got here. Then explain the payments, I replied. Explain Larkspur Linen. Explain the identical vendor addresses that point to UPS mailboxes. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Rage flickered behind his eyes, but there was no path forward for him. Only a cliff. I moved that Thomas Lawson be suspended from all executive duties pending a formal audit and legal review, said Ms. Viller, head of HR and the longest-serving board member. Effective immediately. Petrov seconded. 6 hands rose. 2 abstained. Thomas glared at me as if I'd stolen something from him. As if this company, its people, its legacy, had ever been his to begin with. You don't belong here, he said again, lower this time, a final shot of poison. I stepped closer, meeting his eyes. No, I said quietly. I just came back. And I brought receipts. Security escorted him out. Not in handcuffs, this wasn't TV, but with a silence that said everything. The door shut behind him like the closing scene of a failed empire. I sat down slowly, heart pounding, hands finally trembling now that it was done. I'll be coordinating with outside auditors and legal counsel, I said to the stunned room. But first, I think it's time we started rebuilding trust from the inside out. The meeting ended without applause. Just heavy nods, quiet exits, a few glances that felt less suspicious and more respectful. Not victory, but something close. The storm didn't pass all at once. In the days after the board meeting, the company buzzed with cautious disbelief. Staff didn't exactly celebrate in the halls. This wasn't the Hollywood ending, but there were quiet acknowledgments. A nod here. A longer than usual pause in the elevator. An email from the head of guest services that simply read, "Thank you." Thomas didn't go down quietly. He hired lawyers. Accused me of fraud, slander, manipulation. But the documentation spoke louder than he ever could. And the board, now wary of his damage, kept him at arm's length, eventually moving to sever ties completely. His corner office was cleared out in under a week. Even his fancy espresso machine disappeared, replaced with a standard drip. And somehow I was still standing. Still here. But here wasn't the same. I walked the hotel every morning now, not as a guest or outsider, but as someone finally trying to understand what she'd inherited, not just the power, but the burden. In the kitchens, cooks told me about equipment that had needed replacing for years. In the maintenance rooms, engineers showed me short-circuited HVAC panels patched with duct tape. Budget cuts, they said with wry shrugs. Cuts that had funded linen services no one received. Everywhere I looked, I saw traces of neglect wrapped in Thomas's polished reports. It wasn't just about the money. It was about trust. About people like Elsa in the laundry department who hadn't had a raise in 8 years. About middle managers asked to do more with less while someone above them moved decimal points into a personal bonus. That Sunday I went back to Victor's study one last time. Not for secrets. Just to understand. I sat in his old chair, journal in hand, flipping past the early entries until I reached the last page. The handwriting was shaky, incomplete. Claire, if I've done this right, you'll have everything you need. But not everything you want. You'll have to earn that back on your own. This company isn't just a balance sheet. It's made of names you should know. People who show up even when it rains. If you remember that, if you listen first, you might just make something better than I ever did. If not, well, burn it down. But do it with clarity. I closed the book and for the first time in days I cried. Not for Victor. Not even for Thomas. But for the girl I used to be. The one who left this town convinced that kindness had no place in power. The one who chose social work over spreadsheets because she thought she had to pick. That night, I drafted a memo to the entire staff. It wasn't a press release or a branding campaign. Just a promise. We're not going to pretend everything's fine. It wasn't. But from here on out, the doors are open, literally. My office, my team are numbers. Transparency isn't a buzzword. It's the baseline. Let's fix this together. I sent it before I could overthink. Sometimes clarity means stepping into the storm anyway. By week 4, the silence was gone. Not the comfortable kind, the absence of secrets, the soft lull of shared effort. No, that had replaced the other silence. The uneasy kind. The hush of walking on eggshells, of power misused, of everyone pretending not to notice what was wrong. Now there was noise. Genuine, messy noise. Staff meetings had laughter. Housekeeping led a committee on sustainability practices. The concierge team sent me a spreadsheet of accessibility upgrades they'd wanted for years: door sensors, signage in Braille, an actual ramp on the south entrance. We started fixing things. Not just policies and budgets. Relationships. Daniel Kim, who had once whispered concerns into his coffee, now led a cross-departmental review of all vendors. Karen from accounting began mentoring 2 younger women in finance, something she said she'd always wanted to do, but never felt empowered enough to try. The lobby got new light fixtures. The linen closets got organized. And I got invited to the break room birthday party for Carla, who ran reservations. They gave me a slice of carrot cake and didn't look at me like I was some mythical corporate ghost. For the first time, I belonged. But progress has a strange way of unearthing things. It stirs up the past like rain bringing out old rust. One morning, as I was reviewing long-term occupancy data, I received an envelope. No return address. Inside was a single page, typewritten. You think you've won. But loss in blood doesn't bleed out that easily. There was no signature, no threat. Just the implication. The smell of rot beneath fresh paint. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. But I ordered a full IT security audit. Quietly. Because part of leadership is knowing that change doesn't kill the old beast. It just drives it underground. That same week, I got a call from someone I hadn't heard from in years. Aunt Marion. Victor's sister. Thomas's mother. We met at the park near the river. Neutral ground with a coffee cart and enough early spring wind to keep things from getting too emotional. She wore a long gray coat and oversized sunglasses, like a woman who still held her place in the pecking order, even if the pecking had slowed. I was angry, she said. No preamble. That Victor didn't leave it to Thomas. I figured. She studied me. But then I saw the board notes. The staff letters. What you've done. He wasn't wrong, was he? I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just said no. He wasn't. She nodded. I won't apologize for Thomas. That's his to carry. Fair enough. But I will say this. You're not like this family, Claire. You're better. And with that, she left me on the park bench, coffee cooling in my hands. Not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. And in families like ours, that was a thunderclap. Spring came late that year. April in Ashland was all confused skies, rain, sun, mist, repeat. But it was the kind of chaos that made things grow. On a Thursday morning, I stood at the window of Victor's old office, now my own, watching cherry blossoms bloom just beyond the front drive. The board had finalized Thomas's removal 2 weeks earlier. No lawsuit. No press scandal. Just a terse legal agreement and a quiet buyout. He moved to Scottsdale. Started a consultancy. No one from the company went to his goodbye party. The audit confirmed everything. $2.7 million embezzled over 4 years. Paper trails as elaborate as a Russian nesting doll. It would have taken another year to unravel if not for Victor's journal, Daniel's help, and a few brave people who chose to speak. We didn't press charges. Not because we couldn't. Because Victor once wrote, "A company cannot heal through spectacle. It has to rebuild through stewardship." Instead, we rebuilt in daylight. We gave raises. Real ones. We created a profit-sharing model for all full-time staff. We opened an anonymous hotline for whistleblowers, and actually followed up. The Ashland Grand, our flagship, hit a 92% occupancy rate that month. Guest reviews included phrases like warmer than expected, and you can feel the culture shift. That one made me smile. One afternoon, I went down to the laundry floor, just because. Elsa saw me and muttered, "If you're looking for a PR photo op, I didn't do my hair." I laughed. "I'm just looking for the woman who runs the place behind the scenes." She gave me a look, then handed me a folded towel with crisp corners. "You're still learning," she said. "But at least you're asking the right people." Later that evening, I visited the rooftop terrace, the one we used to avoid as kids because Victor hated anything decorative. We turned it into a staff retreat space now. String lights, soft chairs, a fire pit that glowed in the dusk. Daniel sat there with a mug of tea, files open on his lap. I sat beside him. "You ever think," he asked, "that you could have just walked away from all this?" "All the time." He glanced at me. "Regret it?" I took a long breath. "Watch the last light spill over the hills." "No. I just regret what it cost to get here." And that was the truth. Because this wasn't a victory lap. It was a clearing of rubble. 6 months later, I found a final note tucked in the back of Victor's journal. Folded, faded, meant to be seen last. "If they ever tell you you're not one of us, Claire, tell them this. You're the one who stayed kind. That's the rarest power there is." I closed the journal for the last time and set it in the safe, not as evidence, but as inheritance. The kind that mattered. This company may have been built by men like Victor, but it would be carried forward by people like Elsa, Daniel, Karen. People who'd known how to survive long before I ever came back. And me? I wasn't the heir anyone expected, but I was the leader they had now. And I'd earned my place not with fire and fury, but with clarity, compassion, and a crown made not of gold, but quiet. What I learned. Power is easy to seize. Respect is harder. Legacy is something you live, not inherit. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to fight louder. It's to lead differently.